The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
On this episode of Comes with the Territory,
it has been a long, hard road,
but there's a smoother path ahead. Governor Bryan recently announced a $1.1 billion federal boost to the territory's recovery efforts. Disaster Recovery Director Adrienne Williams-Octalien joins us with details on what this means for the Virgin Islands.
Donald J. Trump, 73.98. Nikki Haley, 26.02.
Donald Trump easily won the Virgin Islands GOP caucus on February 8th, beating his last remaining rival in the race, Nikki Haley, with 74% of the vote. But it remains unclear how many local delegates will participate in the Republican convention. We'll get to the source of the confusion. Plus, a lawsuit against WAPA over its faulty smart meters has been amended to propose a class action claim representing at least 50,000 ratepayers. We'll have more, and later. This week's Power Panel joins the conversation to analyze these issues and more. Comes with the Territory starts now. Welcome to Comes with the Territory. I'm Leslie Kamisiam. After years of persistent lobbying, the Bryan administration recently secured a significant step forward for the territory's recovery efforts. Here's more.
President Biden has moved to subsidize our recovery with another $1.1 billion, and it may be more.
Calling it an awesome day for the Virgin Islands, Governor Albert Bryan Jr. recently announced a long-awaited increase in the federal contribution for the territory's disaster recovery projects. Bryan emphasized a years-long effort spanning 2 federal administrations to achieve this milestone.
We have been working on this for 5 years. We started with submitting a request to the FEMA director at the time to try to get it the match waived to 100%. It was denied by then FEMA director, and then we submitted it to President Trump, who denied it again. When President Biden was elected and sworn in, we submitted it to then FEMA director Deanne Criswell, where it was denied again, and then subsequently submitted it to President Biden, where it was denied again. Well, one of the things that we thought was, well, if we can't get all, why don't we try to get some?
This thinking worked. The required 10% local match was reduced to 5% for permanent work projects and just 2% for Section 428 projects. This means the federal government will now fund up to 98% of the territory's more complex projects to rebuild schools, hospitals, and other critical facilities.
If you look at that straight at 98%, we move from having to come up with $800 million to only now having to come up with $160 million. So you can see the tremendous impact in just that $8 billion in recovery alone.
Now we can identify the match so we can move forward in getting our critical schools, our hospitals, our undergrounding projects, along with our wastewater projects moving with Rebuild USVI. This is a precedent-setting opportunity that was provided to us by FEMA. This has not been done anywhere else in the history of FEMA for us to be able to get our 428 projects, which are our fixed grant projects, obligated at 98%, and also our public assistance, our 406 projects, obligated at 95%, addressing the issues for the match. We are tremendously appreciative of the partnership that has been done with FEMA here in this insular area, and all utilizing all of the benefits that are afforded to the Virgin Islands to be able to rebuild and to do so resiliently.
Joining the show from our St. Croix studio is Adrienne Williams-Octalien, Director of the Office of Disaster Recovery. It's great to have you here with us. Now, the governor used the term awesome. Joe Biden a few years ago said this was a big, you know what, deal. But let me tell you, this is cause for the territory to definitely celebrate. Big, big, big development for us. Explain, however, to our viewers that may not be familiar with this process, what this all means, what cost share is, what it is, why it's necessary, and how does it work on a basic level so they can understand.
Sure. And Leslie, it is a big deal. When I first got the news, I actually danced a jig. I was so elated that all of the hard work and that it actually means for the territory. This was one of the biggest challenges that, this overall rebuilding and expending what could potentially be $15 billion in federal dollars in territory is a monumental task. But basically, what does that actually mean? It means that our public assistance program, which is the largest funder for the recovery dollars, has a match. It's 90% that will be obligated by the federal agency, which is FEMA, and the territory has to come up with 10% of whatever that project is. And over the course, we are looking at now where we have projects that, okay, we do have the federal funds, but we don't have the corresponding match to be able to execute the project. And in order for us to start any projects, we have to have the entire amount. So it was a significant concern. Where would the territory find? We're at potentially $15 billion in funding that pretty much is on its way based on the projects that we have, because we have over 1,500 projects in the territory, and we'll have to find a match. So $1.5 billion, and the typical way where jurisdictions will be able to provide that match is through the CDBG DR dollars that comes from HUD. We designated, there's $1.9 billion that was allocated for the territory from Housing and Urban Development. And we had designated up to about $500 million in funding to be able to meet the match. Well, you know what that says, Leslie? That's $500 million of funding that could have been used for housing, for infrastructure, but we would have to utilize that for the match. And as the amount of the obligations started to rise, it was clear to us that $500 million would absolutely not be enough, and we would have to be able to find those funds before we can start projects. And those are the critical projects, the larger projects. We're seeing the hospitals obligated at $1 billion. We need to find a match for that before we can actually start. So when this news came that we're now down to finding, instead of 10%, 2%, it all got now in reach. It is actually now attainable. We can move forward with getting our project started.
Well, the governor in our opening piece, discussed the rejections that we had and how long this process was. Give us a little step by step, because he is adept at coming up with local colloquialisms to discuss different things. And from Sluxin to Brata, this had sung like we had get couple bus chess, because FEMA was turning us down, and it really prohibited the process. So let's share with the viewers what it really took for us to get to this point.
Well, we did a lot of bawling, if you want to start the colloquialism. But we had to be persistent. It really took a full court press, if I want to use some basketball analogy, where the delegate, we spoke with everyone who would listen. The Department of Interior, we've made numerous trips to headquarters at FEMA, in DC, to all of the federal agencies, just pleading the case of the territory that here we are presented with a monumental opportunity. And we, as an insular area, the Insular Area Act allows for the waiving of the match by federal agencies. There's a lot of talk where they would tell us, well, you know what? You need to have skin in the game. I was like, well, we have skin in the game. We are committed to getting our projects done. But there was a real unwillingness to waive the match completely. So, we kept going. Our last attempt last year was to the US OMB Director, Shalana Young, and pleaded the case. And we're saying, you don't have to waive the entire match. We are committed to paying our bills. We have resources that through the CDBG-DR funds that we will dedicate to that point. However, it's not going to be enough. We as a territory, if you look at our infrastructure, look at the needs that we have, we cannot afford to miss out on this opportunity. And they're saying, well, there's a lot of benefit that was provided to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. In some of those conversations, they would say, well, if we do this for the Virgin Islands, we would have to do this for Puerto Rico as well. And we kept going back and saying, no, the Virgin Islands is an insular area. The Insular Area Act provides for this. And Puerto Rico, if it's not your will, it's not precedent setting because Puerto Rico is a commonwealth. So we've been at this. Anyone who would listen, every time I spoke, I've testified before Congress on 2 occasions, and we shared that the territory has some concern about the match. The Bipartisan Budget Act that the delegate and their colleagues worked on was monumental for the territory. But there's still an additional need for us to be able to find a match that came with the additional dollars that the BBA provided. And, our voices and our cries were heard, and we're just at a point now where we're ready to move forward.
Well, you must be reading my mind, because my next question is going to be about sharing with the viewers what's the plan to meet the new match requirements. How is this exactly going to work? And what stipulations are there for the various types of funding? If you could explain that to our viewers.
Sure. So there's certain stipulations that came with the new guidance on the percentages for the match. The 428 projects, they are fixed grant projects. 428 projects mean that anything designated as a 428 project means that we as a territory not have the opportunity to go back for additional funds. It's capped. This is the amount of funding that you'll get. The only opportunities there would be for mitigation measures. But this fixed cap grant is established at the amount that was obligated. And we had to select a 428 process for the projects that would be funded by the BBA. So what we're doing now, pretty much we've had these conversations with FEMA. This funding will be obligated. In many cases, we owe some contractors money on the match. We will draw these funds down once it's obligated and be able to pay those funds out. The stipulations in the agreement is that we complete the projects now within 11 years, and if we are unable to do so, then the match will revert to 95% as opposed to 98%. But however you look at it, we will still fall in a much better position that we've been in because the match previously was 90%. So if we are unable to complete those projects within 11 years, then the match will go back to 95% as the non-428 projects or non-BBA projects. As right now, that is the baseline on the disaster. It's a 95/5 cost share on the disaster now.
Wow. Now, the governor in his State of the Territory address just last month discussed the fact that he was putting together an initiative called Rebuild VI. It's a plan to complete the remaining projects and really put a concerted effort behind rebuilding the territory post Irma and Maria. Let's talk about that plan, where it is right now, what's the timeline to roll out Rebuild USVI?
Rebuild USVI, it's definitely the strategy that we have to move the projects forward. When we looked at the experience that we've had over the last 5 years, we know that doing things differently and expecting different results is definitely the definition for insanity. And we have projects now that we're looking at the challenges that we're having with manpower, challenges that we have with our capacity to be able to manage multiple projects. The contractors that are able to get the bonding, they have many projects that they're working on right now. And we know that we had to introduce new contractors to the territory if we're going to build 5 healthcare facilities and repair 42 schools, repair or reconstruct 42 schools, looking at replacing the wastewater system and the potable water system and undergrounding projects all at the same time and still trying to keep the quality of life here in the Virgin Islands. We had to do things differently. So Rebuild USVI calls for us to issue group projects and bundles, billion-dollar bundles that would allow us to have some synergies across projects, be able to maximize on economies of scale for projects. I'll give you an example. Lay down yards, if we're doing 3 facilities in the same area, we're able to utilize the lay down areas, or materials, standardization of materials across various projects. Those are the types of things that really provided a benchmark for where we believe we are now and where we need to get to. And when we started this off by talking to different contractors all across the United States about coming to the Virgin Islands and the opportunities that we have here and the plans that we have with Rebuild USVI. We hosted Industry Day in December. So we met with the contractors. We encouraged them to come down. And they said, well, yes, we'll come and we'll see. And we were very pleased with the outcome in December, where we were talking about to these contractors. Those are the signs that contractors are signs that when you go to the United States, you see that these major construction companies that do work all over the United States will come down to the Virgin Islands. Contractors that have experience in building in difficult to construct areas where they know there's not enough manpower. They spoke about bringing concrete plants and different ways to address supply chain issues, different ways to address manpower shortages, and all the things that we know that we will be grappling here with in the Virgin Islands. So we plan to get this out and start the solicitations in March. This is the first quarter, what we committed to do in the first quarter of this year. And we are working on executing those solicitations to begin the work on these critical facilities like our hospitals, the Wang F. Louis Hospital, the Donna Christian Complex on St. Croix. Those are the types of projects that we expect to be bundling and getting them started.
You just alluded to a topic that I've heard the governor address, and that is key at the heart of our recovery, which is workforce capacity. I remember speaking to Governor Kenneth Mapp just after the storms about using back then in 2018 as the time to implement the types of training in the areas, the project management, the construction management, the heavy equipment operating that are going to be necessary to put this territory back together again. So share with our viewers what's been done and what's in the work in terms of training and upping our workforce capacity.
Well, Leslie, when the funding was originally allocated to the territory, if you will recall, HUD and some of the other federal agencies had some concerns about capacity in the territory to do this work. And since then, there was a study commissioned by FEMA, done by RAND Corporation, that really started to look at the challenges that the territory would have once the construction started and once these dollars are starting to be infused into the economy. And the capacity was stated at that time, we're looking at, they stated that if we had 5,000 workers, if every able-bodied person in the Virgin Islands was working, that means Uncle Ali, Brother John, everybody who could actually afford to be working was working. We would need 5,000 more workers. Wow. As we go further now into the disaster, it basically looking at 7,000 as the number right now. And when you look at that, our contractors that we spoke to said, we will come to the territory, but we want to maximize the workforce that's here. That was good for us. So we've started talking maybe about 3 years ago when we initially established the Office of Disaster Recovery. All of the stakeholders, the Department of Education, the University of the Virgin Islands, the UVI cell, started looking at what are the demand occupations for this disaster. We were looking at financial analysts, construction management, the data analysis, forensic accounting. And we talked about, well, where are these needs? If we're going to be building over the next 11, 12, 13 years, that means that we need to start training our students that are in high school, being able to create offerings when at the University of the Virgin Islands and certification programs. And Dr. Hall responded and Dr. McHale, we had a task force and that started to offer construction management courses at the university, other courses and certificate programs. And then we also funded a program called Skills for Today with hot dollars, where all of the NCCER courses, construction management, all of the different types of training for construction. And it was very successful. And over 800 students and participants across the territory were receiving this training so that we can be ready to address the call, knowing that there's a lot more to be done, but we want to ensure that everyone who wants to be trained and be able to tap into the resources here that exist before we have to go outside and bring folks in.
Now we are running out on time because time flies when you're having fun. But I want to address a really important topic because we hear these terms bandied about and we hear large sums of money. And the impression sometimes some people get from hearing that is that we have billions of dollars sitting in a bank account somewhere, and that's just not true. So let's talk real quickly in a minute about approximately how much has been expended in recovery dollars, the difference between expended, allocated, and obligated, the Sesame Street version, real quickly.
In a minute. Okay, so allocated is when we say that the federal government is saying, here, I have this money here set aside for you, but you can't get it until you put in an application and you tell us how you're going to spend this money, and they agree and approve the application, and that's obligated. So we have $8 billion obligated. We've created applications and they said, hey, yes, you can have this money approved for you. You do not have access to these funds until we actually do the work, and then we can draw the funds down. So you're absolutely correct, Leslie. It is not in a bank account. It is almost like a line of credit that we can draw down these funds once we have projects. So $8 billion obligated, $3 billion has been expended or spent out of that $8 billion. And we anticipate getting up to having $15 billion obligated on this disaster. I hope Cookie Monster got that.
Man, Cookie Monster and Big Bird and the count would be so proud of you. You nailed it. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. To learn more about the territory's recovery projects, visit www.usviodr.com. Be sure to tune in to Recovery in Focus, an hour-long monthly show that keeps residents updated on the progress of the territory's recovery for Hurricanes Irma and Maria. Recovery in Focus airs on the last Thursday of every month right here on WTJX Channel 12. Up next, we'll hear from this week's Power Panel, but first, let's look at the issues up for discussion.
Donald J. Trump, 73.98. Nikki Haley, 26.02.
Local Republicans rejoiced when former President Donald Trump won the third in the nation Virgin Islands Republican caucus on February 8th against rival Nikki Haley in a ranked choice contest. Trump called in to thank attendees at an election night event organized by the Republican Party of the Virgin Islands.
That is a big victory. We expected to win, but we didn't expect to win by that much. You are incredible people. I will never forget. Thank you very much.
Event organizers also played a pre-recorded video message from Trump speaking directly to Virgin Islanders.
We will do something that's very special with our country, and we're always on top of the fact that things that the Virgin Islands needs and has needed over the years, and I know all about it because we work very closely with your representatives, but you've always come through, and I've always come through for you, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate it very much. I think we're going to do something very special, and it's called Make America Great Again. We're going to make America great. We're going to make the Virgin Islands great again, and it's not going to be that tough because you are starting with something that's very, very special, and the most special thing of all are your people.
In addition to the overwhelming support for Trump, GOP residents elected 2 new party officers, John Yob as Republican National Committeeman and April Newland as Republican National Committeewoman. They will serve 2-year terms. During this caucus, voters also elected 6 members of the Republican State Committee who ran unopposed. Jameson Engelhardt, Vanessa Mull Coffin, and Crystal Flores from St. Croix, and Alexandra Bonthron, David Weischer, and Mark Zion from St. Thomas. The next GOP primary will be February 24th in Nikki Haley's home state of South Carolina. A lawsuit alleging the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority and its contractors knowingly installed a faulty smart meter system has been amended to propose a class action claim representing at least 50,000 ratepayers. The lawsuit, originally filed in 2021 as a sealed qui tam or whistleblower complaint, accused WAPA, Tantalus Systems Corp., and Itron of installing a defective multi-million-dollar smart meter system. The lawsuit claims the defendants falsely represented that the system would improve WAPA's billing when they knew the system was not compatible with the Virgin Islands infrastructure. This allegedly resulted in wildly inaccurate and excessive bills, according to the complaint. The initial complaint, unsealed last year, focused on false claims regarding system capabilities. It also added plaintiffs like Gordon Ackley and former Public Services Commissioner John Clendenin, who allege being unfairly billed due to system errors. Ackley reportedly faced an $8,553 overcharge related to his smart meter. Publicly, WAPA has acknowledged issues with the smart meter system. CEO Andrew Smith admitted to monthly device failures at a Public Service Commission's meeting in May of 2023. However, Smith also alluded to potential unfounded complaints among reported issues.
So we have roughly 65% of our AMI meters are functioning. We read them electronically, comes into our system, goes out and bills.
We're losing 1,000 a month.
Losing 1,000 a month. That's about 1,000 a month. Right now, 65% roughly are functioning AMI meters. Right? The balance are not. Meters that are functioning are reliable. Right. I'm sure there's one somewhere that's not working right. Okay, fine. Okay, that's anything. The meters that function today are reliable. There's a lot of stuff we don't do right. But I would just ask everybody to understand that sometimes what's explained or portrayed is not always entirely the situation.
Plaintiff attorney Terry Griffiths said she received numerous phone calls from concerned ratepayers after the complaints unsealing, prompting her to propose expanding the lawsuit to a class action in January 2024. The proposed class action amendment is currently pending before the court. And joining our panel for this episode, I have with me Gordon Ackley, chairman of the Republican Party in the Virgin Islands. Welcome, Mr. Ackley.
Thank you.
And joining us from our St. Croix studio, let's welcome local radio talk show host Jamila Russell and Tom Ader, chief reporter for the WTJX newsfeed. Welcome, Jamila and Tom. Thank you for joining us. Gordon, I'm going to come to you first. You are the plaintiff in this class action lawsuit against WAPA. alleging that their smart meters that they have installed in the territory are defective, don't accurately read people's actual power usage, and is overcharging. Tell us about why you were led to file this class action in the first place.
Well, the original complaint, like you said, was sealed under the Whistleblower Act. And I got involved. I was always in the background of it, but once it all came out, people kept calling and calling myself, and because I had a big issue with being overcharged, estimating my bill, and through depositions and things, we found out that WAPA would, they're only allowed to estimate their bill for 3 months, and then they actually had to come out and read it. And they weren't doing that. They would actually just mark the account being read when it wasn't actually being read. And so what I wound up doing is I went out and every month on the same date in time, I read my meter, took a photograph, time and date stamped it, where at that time I was getting bills from WAPA. Sometimes it was on a 21-day billing cycle, sometimes a 60-day billing cycle. And what led up to the overcharges, in which I haven't been able to get straight, and I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. I've always been available for negotiations.
Sure.
I'm willing to negotiate any time, especially when they're charging you an extra $8,000-9,000. Got my attention, and they racked up approximately 20,000 hours in overcharges, and I kept my own records and I disputed it, and finally, 6, 7, 8 months of estimating my bill, not reading my meter, they finally came out and read my meter. And in the next billing cycle, they backed off roughly 20-some thousand hours of electricity, and they never backed the dollar figures off.
Let me ask you something though. Aren't these smart meters designed so that meter readers don't have to actually go out to the physical location? Isn't it supposed to be transmitted a signal with the readings on the meter to WAPA directly so we can save on the gasoline it takes to get there, the employment costs? Isn't that what they're supposed to do?
Well, that's what we were sold. And if you remember, we were promised to be able to look at our meters in real time, where you could go out and say, well, I'm peaking at electricity, let me turn this off. So you could actually get a feel and predict what your bill is going to be. And the system never functioned as advertised. And matter of fact, by what I understand, there was difficulties between the data that they were collecting and interfacing with the WAPA billing system.
We're going to come back to that a little bit more. Jamila, I want to come over to you because I know as a local radio talk show host, WAPA is a consummate issue that you deal with on a weekly basis. But this particular case, and this is, I guess, the third lawsuit that I can recall in recent history being brought against WAPA. It seems like Mr. Octalien and the other plaintiffs have accumulated a substantial amount of evidence to support their claims. How do you think this plays out in the courts?
Well, ultimately, the defense, I don't know what the defense from WAPA is going to be. WAPA has testified consistently at public hearings in an inconsistent manner when it's come to AMI and the level of completion that they've reported publicly. And so we have a problem with WAPA where the public doesn't trust what they say. And now with this lawsuit, they're going to have to prove to the court that what they're saying is actually truthful and provide documentation. And I think even then, the public is still going to be a little bit suspect. And it just speaks to the lack of trust and faith that the people in our territory has with the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority, especially the leadership, not with the rank and file, but the leadership of the Water and Power Authority.
Tom, you have done an in-depth piece on this lawsuit. Share with our viewers what you have uncovered in your research on this particular story.
Yes, definitely. There is a lot of documentation involved in this. The court process is going through, the attorneys are filing a lot of motions right now, and in addition to amended complaints, the defendants are filing motions to dismiss, and they are speaking about different counts. And we have the False Claims Act, which is a federal count, and there is a lot to do with legal proceedings as to how far this case will go. So it boils down to more than what's on the surface of how we feel about WAPA and how we feel about expensive utility bills. There are a lot of legal angles that are being discussed in the motions.
Well, for you, the viewer, you can read more about the WAPA lawsuit in Tom's in-depth article on the WTJX newsfeed. Go to newsfeed.org. That's newsfeed, .wtjx.org. Now, we had a big event in the Virgin Islands, Gordon, that you helped to be the architect of, actual GOP primary with a ballot, a caucus, with a ballot with presidential names on it. Share with the viewers your vision, how we became third in the nation with a caucus, and the journey to get to the event you had on February 8th.
Well, it was a calculated move for the Virgin Islands. It's about elevating our voices, elevating the needs of the territories. And, people normally don't pay attention to us. If we go 30th in the nation, who cares? The race is over by then. And what we did was truly amazing. Iowa went first, New Hampshire went second. But if you look what happened in Nevada, they split, and Nikki Haley ran in the state primary that only Nikki Haley was in, and none of the above won. The other faction of the party held a caucus, and no one else participated in it except for Donald Trump. And at the same time, following us is South Carolina. And at that time, when we were doing the negotiations, they only had 3 representatives of the presidential candidates. And we talked to all the presidential candidates, and we sold them on our platform. And we had 8 of the presidential candidates sign up.
Yeah, that was actually very impressive. The fact that we had that many. I mean, it was earlier in the cycle, but they all committed to being on the ballot, and they all, met the requirements and paid the fees. And I thought that was a pretty innovative effort on the GOP's part to fundraise for the party and to make sure that they knew we here in the Virgin Islands, we're here and we mean something.
Well, it is exactly what happened. And, it would have been a little different. I mean, I think it really we would have been able to get the top tier candidates actually to visit the territory. And that was our ultimate goal. We didn't quite get there because of the consolidation that went pretty quick. But, I think if somebody won New Hampshire, somebody else won Iowa, they would have been down here, and we made a joke. We said, President Trump, why don't you just fly the jet by the airport downtown Circle Christianstead? But it turned out rather well. We got national recognition, ABC, Associated Press. We put the Virgin Islands on the map. We put our voice on the map about the presidential vote, that we're treated as second-class citizens when it comes in federal government reimbursement for the funds that we dearly require. Our cost of living is so high that we can't be shortchanged, and expect to have a quality of life that we deserve. So we made our voices known, and they responded. And goes back to we sort of tried to get them to commit to allow us to make sure that they fill in U.S. Marshals, the AG's office, and judges, which are all appointed positions. If the Republicans take the White House back, they committed to working with us and filling those positions, which we need.
Yeah, we saw that in the recorded message from Donald Trump in his victory speech. Tom, let's go over to the island of St. Croix and discuss, in your reporting, what was the feel of the territory leading up to the GOP caucus? And did you have a chance to talk to any of the participants in the caucus on February 8th?
Yeah, the feel was pure excitement, to put it plainly. there was a lot of attention on the Virgin Islands, and we had members of Congress fly to the territory to let their voices be heard. They were stumping for Trump in the Virgin Islands. The ones that I had interviewed were specifically Representative Wesley Hunt out of Texas, and he was at the Palms at Pelican Cove here on St. Croix when I met him, and he gave an invigorating speech to the room full of attendees, encouraging them to go out and vote for Trump in the caucus. And also over on St. Thomas, there was a couple members from Congress as well, and they were mixing and mingling with our voters, our residents, and trying to tell them why they think Trump would be the best pick going into the caucus.
Now, Jamila, as a radio talk show host, I know you handle a variety of topics, and I'm sure at some point or the other, you've discussed this GOP caucus. What was the feelings, thoughts, emotions that the participants in your show had about the caucus?
Well, surprisingly, I didn't know Republicans listened to my show, but I had some Republicans that called in when I spoke about it. But there was a sense of excitement with the Republicans. And truthfully, I thought that the GOP party of the Virgin Islands put the Virgin Islands on the map because, as an unincorporated territory of the United States, we don't vote for president. And leveraging the little power that we have by placing us third in the nation in the GOP, it allowed for people to include us in the conversation. And so our needs, and I saw where the local Republican Party, which I am not a part of, lobbied heavily to have our needs addressed. And I must give kudos to the Republican Party because they did effectively things that we have not been as successful in doing, in leveraging the little power that we have to bring national recognition to the needs of the territory. And so I thought more people would turn out, the members of the 900 plus members of the Republican Party, but I thought that they did a really good job. And I look forward, moving forward in the next 4 years, having us placed third, keeping us within the conversation nationally.
Now, this wasn't easy. And over the years, there's been some infighting, we know, with the party. I'm going to put that aside. We might come to it in the end. But tell us, do you think a Trump win was inevitable?
Personally, I think Nikki Haley would have done a lot better than she did. I mean, she stumped pretty hard here.
Yeah.
And, she several occasions spoke to people. But that's the difference of what we did versus what the ruling party is doing. We actually broke it down where traditionally you'd have a delegate selection committee and these people would go behind closed doors and then all of a sudden they'd pop out and say, we're gonna back X, Y, and Z. And, since we upset the boat a little bit and went early, we said, well, why don't we, put it down to the people and let the people select the candidates, and henceforth, that's why our official ballot had the presidential names on it.
Yeah.
And some of the feedback I got from some of my friends and some new people that I didn't know, they said it just felt different when you got to see, you could check your name by a Donald Trump or a Ramaswamy or Nikki Haley, because we've never been able to do that before. And I'd like to continue that concept, in future elections.
Now, I want to give you some credit because there was some pushback about the Virgin Islands being third in the nation, and you fought like the Dickens to make sure that we stayed third in the nation. What was that battle like?
Well, it was, you have opposing forces. Some of the complaints came from the chairman of South Carolina. he sort of thought we stole business from him because we had 8 candidates sign up for our caucus, and he only had 3 sign up for his caucus. And we outsold.
I hope you guys are still friends.
Well, we're Republicans, put it that way. Okay. But yeah, they sort of thought we stole the thunder from them. But you know, we need to elevate our voice, and I'm truly glad that we did what we did. I think we proved a point that, you know, if we do make ourselves known, people will respond. And I'm just, you know, elated that, you know, we got this much attention. We got, you know, great attention from the national news. Some people said it was genius what we did.
I absolutely agree, to be honest. And I'm a Democrat, but I can concede that it was genius.
Yeah.
And we've said that on the show in discussing, you know, having shows leading up to this episode. Right. And before the caucus, I said this was absolutely genius. I think that there is a page that can be taken out of your book. Now, I want to ask you about the dispute that's been reported about the actual delegate. How did that arise with such a smooth process and a process that was so well publicized? Yeah. How do we end up with a dispute over who the actual representatives going to the convention are?
There's not a dispute on the representatives. It's how many delegates that we're sending.
So share with the viewers.
Okay. It sort of becomes a mathematical equation. They sort of, since we went early and other states complained, they had to sort of slap us a little bit. Well, if you read the rules and you do the math, they cut our delegation in half, which they said, you know, they dropped us down to 4. But the way we interpret the rules, the national committee man, national committee woman, and the chairman are super
delegates, yeah.
Right? They're not there. So if you cut our delegation, which is 6 in half, would be 3, which means we should wind up with a total of 6 and not 4.
Okay. Understood. Okay.
And so what we actually did in our caucus meeting, we addressed all the scenarios. We went ahead and had a 4-person slate, a 6-person slate, and a 9-person slate. And you know, when we get to final, we're negotiating with the RNC. I think it will at least get 6. And if Mr. Trump's on my speed dial, maybe we'll get all 9 back.
I like that. So let me ask you one more thing. Your efforts to grow the Republican Party. This is a good opportunity here on Comes with the Territory to share with our viewers, what is the Republicans' view, goal, agenda for the Virgin Islands moving forward?
Well, our goal is to have accountability. And I think that most people in the territory, you know, we've been going down to one-party rule now for 30 years, 35 years. In the 80s, we had 5, 6, Republican senators. Yeah. And we sort of had a balance in the territory, good and bad. But, you know, we argued, we fought, but we all went out and had a Heineken afterwards.
Yeah.
So, you know, that is gone, you know, and I don't like the fact that we've gotten to the point that we fight to the death each time. You know, the art of negotiation we need to bring back. We need to bring that civil discourse back to our political environment. And I think that's what the Republican Party here, we're more focused on the local issues. The national issues, yes, but we're mainly focused on the local issues. I mean, you know, it's not a Republican issue for having clean drinking water, having safe streets. You know, there's things that we need to do as a party, get the refinery back open over in St. Croix. And these are, like I said, they're not one side or the other. These are community issues that we have. You know, and it goes back to the same thing with the erroneous WAPA billing and putting stress on people. You know, it's a quality of life issue. And, you know, everybody's working for the power company. We have the 1st or the 2nd highest rate in the world for electricity. And I go back to when I was a kid, you know, we had 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. And that was 50 years ago. And every time we try and fix WAPA, we don't fix it, and our rates keep going up now that we're the highest in the world. And that is not a compliment, okay? That's a disgrace.
Exactly.
Okay? And we need to finally fix it once and for all and get the politics out of it. And that's basically what we're asking for is accountability.
A bill that criminalizes the non consensual dissemination of sexually explicit images recently cleared the Senate Committee on Homeland Security, Justice, and Public Safety. Let's play a clip from the February 13th Senate hearing.
Just imagine having explicit photos, images of yourself shared across the globe with strangers. And we don't have to imagine it. We see it here in the territory, right here in our small islands. Most states make it a misdemeanor for a first offense and a felony for a second or subsequent offense. This bill follows that practice. It criminalizes the practice of disseminating non-consensual images of a sexually explicit nature if the perpetrator acted with a specific intent.
This bill is important because it protects the privacy and dignity of victims who have been subjected to this form of abuse.
It encouraged them to go forward because now they don't want to go forward because there's no justice. Why should I put myself out on a limb to get humiliated and embarrassed because ain't nothing going to happen? It ain't going to go to court. The person ain't going to get arrested. I'm just going to be further humiliated. So we're hoping that this bill gives them what they need to go forward to seek justice.
There are some amendments that I think we need to consider because you can get into a situation where you have what I call a reverse revenge. And this can happen if Chad get a new girlfriend. This reverse revenge can pop up, Papa.
Bill of this nature, I don't care what amendments we have today. It needs to pass. We will fix it in Rules and Judiciary. And if not, we fix it in the full body for session.
Jamila, working at the Virgin Islands Legislature, I am sure you have intimate knowledge of the content of this bill, why it came about, and a lot of the stories that may not appear in the local media that have occurred, that have affected residents of our community. You know, those of us in the know with our ears to the ground in this community, we could give you stories. In fact, watching that clip was kind of interesting because there are individuals that spoke in that clip that have had situations that involved media getting out about them. And that's even, it affects members of the Virgin Islands Legislature. Think about that for a second. This is long overdue, but tell us, having worked for the sponsor of the legislation, how this bill came into being and the reason why it is so critical now in the territory to have this become law.
Well, thank you, Leslie. And I've been working with the senator since his 34th legislature, and since then, she has been working on getting this piece of legislation to the floor. And we have had countless instances where we've had people call our office in tears because a photo has been shared of them on WhatsApp or on other forms of social media. And so it was a long process. We had to make sure we got it right, so that when it got to the floor, it could sustain legal challenges. And so we worked with the legal counsel to make sure we tightened up the loopholes. We worked with those agencies that work daily with victims of these types of crimes. And we see it, we've seen it. We've seen the horrible videos that are shared on a regular basis within the community. And so the time is always right to do the right thing. And this bill is timely, and I'm glad that the senator was able, with a committee of 7, to get 6 members of the committee, which she's not a member of, to support the measure and move it on to the Committee on Rules and Judiciary for further consideration.
Tom, I don't know if you had a chance to do any reporting on this bill, but just having watched the clip that we played as an intro, the different senators having various opinions, what takeaways do you have from what you just saw?
Yes, the main thing is we are living in a digital age, and it's very important to protect innocent victims. And it's just become so common to record daily lives, take photographs, and when that crosses the line into an intimate setting, there is it's never acceptable to use any footage, whether it be photographs or video, to try to expose your intimate partner in a way that we would get revenge is just unacceptable, and it's definitely time for the Virgin Islands lawmakers to put in statute some penalties so that we can hold accountable the people who do this without even thinking that they would ever get in trouble for doing it. So it's very timely and very much needed.
Now, Gordon, you grew up here in the Virgin Islands. A lot of people probably don't know that about you. And this is kind of like a reunion for us because I worked for you for many years on radio. Media has evolved. Media has changed. And to Tom's point, technology, I mean, we're constantly connected in a way that we have never been in human history. Given the intimacy of relationships in the Virgin Islands, I always say there are no degrees of separation in this territory. And you know that better than most people. Why do you think this bill, other than the relevancy, well, let me rephrase this question. And there's something that was said by Senator Fonseca that kind of bugged me in that clip. This reverse revenge terminology. Revenge is revenge. If you and I were dating and you moved on and you got a new girlfriend, if I decided to expose intimate pictures of you, that's revenge, whether you moved on or you're with me. So I think the senator was out of touch with that. But relating to your experience in media, what you know about technology now, what takes do you have on this legislation? And do you think it's something that we need in the territory? And do you think it passes?
Well, I believe that it's long overdue. If you go back and remember, I built 2 of the 3 first internet companies in the territory.
Yeah.
And it was always a constant battle. I'd get, search warrants and subpoenas and things for data. And what these people don't realize, and this is a warning to everybody, I just hacked a hacker the other day, bring them down. But, every keystroke that you ever do on the internet is recorded somewhere. And, a lot of times, we can find out somebody went into a computer, who logged in, the IP address, so we can reverse trace route it, right down to the internal MAC address of their handheld or their computer at their house. And so, these people are fooling themselves. And even the pictures contain metadata, and a lot of them have geographical metadata turned on, and the consumer doesn't even know it. But people with the knowledge, that's how we find people. Yeah. And you will be found. I mean, you start putting out
that's
these
an important
things.
Part to mention.
Okay. But it goes back to the same thing in our police department. We need to, elevate the police department into, digital security, cyber security, that, you'll be able to call up the police department and I have a hacker, somebody's extorting me, for money, somebody's shutting down my business, okay? And we need to, upgrade our police department and have a digital police department who deals with these type of, offenses.
And that's a very great point. I know for a fact that Commissioner Ray Martinez has made some strides in getting the police department the type of equipment that can help violators of these types of crime, be persecuted or prosecuted rather in the territory. Anyway, folks, thank you all for joining me on the panel. That's all we have for the show today. But be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. for an all-new episode of Comes with the Territory. In the meantime, for your news updates, tune into the WTJX newsfeed on weekdays at 5 p.m. on 93.1 FM or by downloading the WTJX app. I'm Leslie Camisiang for all of us here at WTJX Channel 12. Have a great Sunday.